Thank you. I think we've heard enough about Many of the Streets and Design Bulletin 32. Yes, right. This is the sea squirt, which is a very interesting creature, which it leaves its parents as an adolescent, and it then has one thing to do in its life, which is to find a rock to stick on. And once it's found its rock to stick on, it stays there for the rest of its life. Getting to the rock, it needs to understand its environment and make decisions about where to go and where this rock is most likely to be. Once it gets to its rock and sticks on it, it eats its own brain. It has no use anymore for a brain. Do you feel a metaphor coming on? Anyway, I'm interested in these built environment professionals and why they have short sleeves. They're up to their elbows in something. But who knows? What's this? It looks a bit like a pavement, but it's too narrow to walk along with a double buggy, or if you've got a stick, or if you're holding a child's hand. Actually, it's meant to be a shared space. But when they passed the drawings over with a line by the side of it, the person who saw these drawings thought, what's that? It must be a pavement. I spend my life designing pavements. I've never built a pavement that narrow before, but it's on the drawing, so I'll build it. It was meant to be a line indicating where the service corridor went. It wasn't meant to be a pavement at all. But at no stage in designing and building this place, as Amy said, did anyone say, let's think about what sort of place we're trying to create. Everyone was doing their professional job, a whole load of different professionals, but they weren't asking that single question. And as they don't know what it is, they park on it. They're meant to be parking, of course, in the parking court round the back, but they don't, because as we've discovered since we started building parking courts, the human being is physiologically incapable of parking in a parking court. Weird, but scientifically proven fact. Here is a parking court that's unused. Another case, why do they build a street light in the middle of the pavement? It's not a pavement, that's the utility corridor, and it's meant to be a shared space, and the woman should be able to push her buggy along in the middle of the street, but they think it's a street for cars, and the parking court is unused. I'll take you through the science, because I need to convince you of the physiology of this, which relates to the human brain. This is the part of the human brain that is more or less devoted to thinking about sex. This tiny little thing down the bottom is concerned with. So who knows? No wonder. We're trying to do the impossible here. We've seen double yellow lines, which tell you usefully that you shouldn't park here. More than that, there's more information. It tells you mustn't park on either side of the road. And nobody's parking. It's working. This is successful. But it's people doing their job and not stepping back and thinking, what is it? What am I doing here? They've replaced the covers. They've removed the clutter. But what effect do they have? This is near me. This is it's the shrine to the cult of the bollard. I don't understand it, but it must be important. the reason why DB32 is so successful, I think, is because highway engineers like numbers, and they like a title. There isn't a DB31 or a DB30. Nobody has heard of that. They thought DB30, let's put a number in it, because then highway engineers will take it seriously. We had MFS, Manual for Streets, and later they brought in MFS2. But they knew that was just because it was the second Manual for Streets. But DB32... It's just a way of thinking. This is the traffic signs manual, which is the sort of DB32 thinking. And I'll explain it to you, because it's not easy to understand. Now, there's a point, I don't know if you know this about roads. You're going on the road, there's a sign in front of you. There is a point at which the sign becomes legible. Before that, you can't see the sign. Suddenly, you see it. Now, you're driving along in the fast lane. There's nobody else on the road at all, but you're driving the fast lane because you want to go fast. And you want to look at the base of the sign. And so you look at it at a 45-degree angle, which, for the sake of argument, we'll call 10 degrees. And because 45 degrees or 10 degrees is the maximum amount. If you ever try, if you swivel your head 10 degrees to either way, 11 degrees, you won't be able to see anything. So your eyes go blank. Until I read this, I didn't realise that. This is the Dorset County Council sightlines. Same thing, useful. They're giving you figures. The highway engineers get figures to tell them what are we meant to be designing the environment to look at. And the answer is 2 metre maximum. And what they're saying is, if it's above 2 metres, it's a bird. You don't have to worry about it. If it's a child less than 0.6 of a metre, they're probably small enough to pass under the car. So, again, useful information. We've heard about how we're creating environments designed around the movement. Rather than about places, but there's the new generation. We mustn't. Some of the highway engineers are still dinosaurs, but there are a lot of the highway engineers who wrote Manual for Streets and who we've heard from today are trying to get us to think differently. I've always wondered why they chose of all the least inspiring picture of any urban environment I've seen that they chose for the cover. And it's obviously really important. So what's happened is that someone has been driving this small plastic car because of the road, the excessively gradual radius. They've spun off at speed, and they're now being given the kiss of life by someone blowing through the top of their head, which is absolute. That's why they chose it. It's people should be warned. I forget what this one is telling us. Yes, it's perhaps. We do place check because it's just a way of looking at, and there's now an app for place check, trying to get people to think, let's just look at the place and ask some simple questions about, get the professionals or whoever's involved together, say, what do we like about this place, what do we dislike, what do we need to work on? Before we start designing stuff, just saying, what are we trying to do? What sort of place are we trying to create? Which we don't do. And place check is a simple way of trying to do that right at the start of the process. And it produces a map and a spreadsheet with lots of information in it. Placecheck.info. And for community groups and neighbourhood organisations, civic societies, we can set them up free based on your particular map. Streets for All is guidance produced by Historic England, which they're now revising for anyone involved in planning and implementing highways and other public realm works in a sense of historic location, and they're consulting on it. And it's a series of quite useful books. There's one general one, and then there's, I think, 13 regional ones looking at how to design highways in particular regional contexts. And it's sort of well-meaning, but sort of totally useless, really, because why? Well, there are no funds available to maintain many of the existing environmental improvements over the last years, poor temporary reinstatement by utility companies, lack of suitable matching materials for permanent reinstatements, reversion to inappropriate and the cheapest available street furniture, limited budgets and outsourced, privatised and regional highway management functions, lack of collaboration and communication between the professionals involved, lack of conservation area appraisals and streetscape audits in conservation appraisals, and lack of local authority conservation staff. And until we start getting these things right, having the right manual for streets and the right Streets for All documents giving us advice about what we can do isn't actually going to solve it. Great news. We've appointed a new conservation officer who's part-time and shared with 2 other local authorities, and it's a temporary post, and she has to do all the urban design as well. So I was trying to think positively over the last 10 years. Is anything improving? I thought, we're noticing biased terminology more. We're looking at road improvements. Yeah, but improvements for who? For the traffic or the pedestrians? It's all in the word. Alternative means of transport. Alternative to what? That means usually alternative to the car, which is the means of transport, and the alternatives are well, if we've got time, we'll do them. Red tape. Red tape. Which sounds like a bad thing, but usually introduced because it's thought that it might save lives. Loitering, well, that's something you shouldn't do, but isn't it what good people do in successful places? I saw this the other day, lowering the Thames, Lower Thames crossing vital to cope with the rising tide of traffic. The rising tide of traffic. It's like, it must be the moon is attracting it, and twice a day the traffic comes up and down. We can't do anything about it. London house prices have outperformed the rest of the country. At last, something to be proud of. House prices are really performing well. Isn't that great? Not necessarily. Now, aliens could be persuaded, you could understand why they might think that cars are the dominant life form on this planet. What are driverless cars a solution to? What is wrong with cars? Well, is it that they disrupt streets, or they have to be driven? If it's that they have to be driven, then making them driverless might be a good thing. Here's the technology, which I don't really understand. So here's the alternatives. Maybe they'll mean that people no longer have to own a car, freeing our streets from the tyranny of car ownership. Or maybe they'll enable people to travel by car for even the shortest journey, bringing about the end of pedestrian-friendly streets. They say that a driverless car has to know, it has to ask itself 3 things. First, where am I? Second, what's around me? And third, what should I be doing? And these are actually questions that I ask myself every morning, and the answer is always, I don't know. And in fact, I, as a fast adopter, have a driverless car, and that driverless car, again, can't answer those 3 questions. And I'll end by showing you a picture of it, and there it is. Thank you.